recommend coming right to 031 degrees true to make 025 degrees good.
Sonar contact, bearing 090 degrees. Classification, possible submarine.
What events from our past influence and shape who we are? There was one major defining experience that shaped who I am today. It all started in 1975, after high school.
General quarters, all hands man your battle stations.
It was the 1970s, and the Cold War was in full swing. Uncle Sam was in a pissing contest with the Soviets, a struggle for dominance that culminated in a combined arsenal of over 80,000 nuclear weapons. We knew each side could deliver a deadly blow. The policy, if you can call such craziness a policy, was called MAD, Mutually Assured Destruction. Each country threatened to destroy the entire world if the other country didn't behave. With the impulsiveness of youth and a ticket to get the hell out of Wisconsin, a few weeks out of high school, I joined the Navy, agreeing to play my part in this outrageous plan to carry out world destruction, if ordered to do so. This is my story of living life on the sub with 140 other men. For 4 years, I lived my life under the threat of one ultimate mission: nuking the world. I was raised in a tavern. My bedroom was above the bar, and it seemed like there was a party every night. Few happy times for our family, though. My parents battled constantly, and my dad's verbal abuse drove a wedge between us. I just obsessed with wanting to kill him. I wanted him dead. Then I had my own self-esteem issues, and I wanted myself dead. I became obsessed with suicide, in addition to my fantasies of killing my father, until I found an escape route: join the Navy. Soon after I enlisted, I volunteered for nuclear submarines.
Today, a new naval weapon has linked the inner space of the sea with outer space itself, and has brought within the reach of a fleet ballistic missile submarine every major military target in the world.
To get on submarines, you had to go through a battery of tests, including the psychiatric evaluation. I remember the psychiatrist asking me, "Would you have a problem killing any of your family members?" And I thought, my father wouldn't have a problem killing him. That was a sure ticket to get on submarines at that time. I guess if I could kill my dad, I wouldn't have a problem pushing the button to kill the rest of the world. It wasn't unusual for me to hold that thought. A lot of guys enlisted, not for love of country, but to escape their parents. We didn't have a gung-ho attitude. We had a difficult time following orders. And after a few patrols, many of us thought it was just nuts to launch nuclear missiles on command.
Their firepower is 16 ballistic missiles, which can be launched from these tubes far below the surface of the sea.
Our main job was to support firing off ballistic missiles, and I remember a lot of times we would have discussions on whether or not the crew would actually participate in shooting off missiles. There are a lot of people that would constantly say that they wouldn't let it happen.
If we were to fire our missiles, that meant missiles had already been fired by the Russians. We were a retaliatory force. Our submarine, along with 40 other subs, would only fire missiles if the Russians fired first. If you were going to be a true patriot here, to follow orders meant annihilating the world. From what I remember, we all felt the pressure of the responsibility for blowing up the world. I always wondered how many other guys remembered it like I did. I found out that some of my shipmates were going to be at this submarine reunion in Branson, Missouri. Branson.
Jesus is deliriously happy. What made him so happy?
Branson is an orgy of God, family, hijacked patriotism, and the military. For me, it epitomizes all the things I despise.
Can I get your attention, please? We're glad that you're here. Enjoy your shipmates. And I'd like you to now stand for the presentation of the colors and the national anthem.
I drew suspicion as soon as I showed up with my camera. Most of these guys at this reunion were of a different mindset, from another generation, with beliefs embedded in a bygone era.
Last night I was dreaming. I dreamed about the H-bomb, where the bomb went off and I was caught. I was the only gal on the ground.
Look, I won't kid you about the A-bomb. I've seen what it can do in Japan, Bikini, and Awetuck. It's deadly. It's like a woman.
That I'd have to see. The atomic bomb. Most of the time, we will be warned before the bomb explodes. So there will be time for us to get into our homes, schools, or some other safe place. It is such a big explosion, it can smash in buildings and knock signboards over and break windows all over town. But if you duck and cover, you will be much safer. It's a bomb. Duck and cover. Duck and cover fast, wherever you are. There's no time to look around or wait. And this is very, very important. The bomb might explode when there are no grown-ups near. Duck and cover. Well, the atomic bomb is very dangerous. Automobiles can be dangerous, too. They sometimes cause bad accidents. Duck and cover.
By the 70s, we were a little more skeptical of authority, a little less willing to trust the wisdom of military leaders and government officials.
And in all of my years of public life, I have never obstructed justice. And I think, too, that I can say that in my years of public life, that I welcome this kind of examination, because people have got to know whether or not their president is a crook.
As military guys, we were instructed to wear civilian clothes whenever we left the base, to avoid being hassled by a distinctly anti-military public. But many of us sailors were anti-military ourselves. On the naval base, they played the national anthem during weekly movie nights. All of us sailors booed. That was the flavor of the era. Branson was downright depressing, so I hit the road again, hoping to find shipmates who shared my experience. Saul Leos and I used to have long philosophical discussions leaning toward the subversive. I located Saul outside of Dallas.
So right here is where we watch Sunday football, right? Dallas Cowboys. I get 10, 15 people in here every Sunday, all Dallas Cowboy fans, most of them, right? And we sit here and we watch this. It's our second garage, so we call it the G2, right? And but we have fun out here, man. Hey, man, you know what I thought the worst thing of the whole boat experience was, and I'm not kidding you, was to get on that freaking bus in New London, man, and leave. The time underwater, all that crap, right? The qualifying, the conditions, all that stuff, the work, all that, nothing compared to the leaving part, right? But because you knew you were going to be missing three months or whatever, right? out of people's lives that you cared about, man, and that sucks, man. A lot of shit happens in 3 months.
I asked Saul if he remembered our late-night conversations over whether or not we'd sabotage the order to push the button.
Come on, you have hours upon hours of time to think of shit. And when you're confined, it tends to get really freaking deep, right? But I remember guys sitting around the cruise lounge down there, man, and talking about deep shit like that. Would you, dude? Would you really do it? Yeah, man. And, you know, no, you know, it was, but then I think, you know, that if it came down to it, I think the first question that guys would have wanted to know is who the hell shot first. If they shot at us first, shit, yes. This launched every one of these motherfuckers.
I don't remember agreeing to that, but Saul did have an answer to the insanity of nuclear weapons.
Anybody can have them. I don't give a shit. But the code or the key or whatever it takes to launch them motherfuckers need to be surgically implanted into the fucking leaders of those countries' bodies. And if they're serious about, and the only way to get them out is to kill the motherfucker to get it out. If he's serious about launching, then you die for it. And that's my answer to all that bullshit. You got the huevos, then you're gonna die. You want these missiles to launch, you're gonna give it up.
Before I left, I had to ask Saul about something else we did on the sub. Hash and marijuana.
Holy moly. I would say that because of the age of the guys, there was quite a few, right? Plus the times, man, it was the 70s, right? Music, environment, the way you grew up, where you grew up. I mean, it was inevitable, right? And I'm pretty sure it happened on all boats in the Navy, right? With those age groups on them, right? But with our job and what we were supposed to be doing and stuff like that, I don't think it ever got in the way. I think it shows that people know what they're supposed to be doing, right? Especially when you're scared or under pressure.
Saul emphasized how responsibly we had smoked the dope, that it wouldn't interfere with following orders to launch, whereas I saw its use as liberating us to think differently, inspiring us to want to subvert orders, stop the launch, save the world. We were miles apart in how we remembered it. I began to wonder if anyone remembered it the way I did.
Answers ahead 1/3.
Aye.
120 feet, trim satisfactory, sir.
Very well.
Former shipmate Michael Clark lives in Los Angeles and comes from a long history of Hollywood filmmaking. He's a fourth-generation sound editor.
My memory is going to be a little hazy, but there are certain issues and items that I do certainly remember. And one of them was the long, long weeks and months that we were out there. And it was a very monotonous routine as far as that goes. I mean, we were 12 on and 12 off. Obviously, quarters were somewhat tight. At least I wasn't a torpedo man or up front, where they literally had to sleep on top of the torpedoes themselves with a rack laid over them. The other one was, for example, if you were involved with exercises, was the experience of being pinged upon by sonar, active sonar from the surface ships. And that would go on for literally days, which, boy, that was just like water torture after a while.
5 guys got busted.
Actually, I'm going to say something on camera.
Yeah.
I was one of those guys that got busted.
There may be nothing wrong with grass, but you can get busted. If you get busted, you've had it. Possession of pot's a felony. You can get a record and you can get sent up. I had a friend that got busted. He was in the Navy. Got a bad discharge and lost his security clearance. Wasn't able to get a job when he got out. Whole future shot to hell.
One of the officers, a gentleman whom I did not have much respect for beforehand, and still don't, because I think the guy was clueless, but given me advice on what was in store for me in the world as far as what I had done. Lieutenant Commander Sheely. And he had taken me aside and said I was a foolish young man that didn't realize what I had done and how I had ruined my life, and that there really wasn't much in store for me out there. And I've been able to lead a very fruitful life, thank you very much. I've made well of my life, and I'm not, so obviously he was just talking out his other end.
I shared the same resentment towards Royal Sheely. He was my direct boss, an officer obsessed with his own authority. He constantly reminded me that my job wasn't to think, but only to follow orders. I loathed all officers, but I hated Sheely above all others. So it should be interesting how I face up to him now. You would think after a man, more than 50 years old like I, could face up to a former officer. We'll see.
I've been a hobby gunsmith for years, making flintlocks and caplock hunting and military rifles. I'm a reenactor. My wife and I both are involved in historical reenactment, 1750s through 1763 and the Revolutionary War period. Some of my ancestors were in both of those events. This is part of my second childhood. The trains have been stashed away in the boxes for years. As I'd mentioned to you earlier, they were my sons, and my son died in '73 of cancer. And so last Christmas, I'd had a small circle around the Christmas tree, and I said, well, I'm going to take a corner of the kitchen and turn it into a Lionel train layout.
These are all models that you built here?
Yeah, they're model. They're old. They were built back when I first had the train set up when my son was still alive. They operated on him, and he started to recover, and then it came back again. And I would make a patrol, and the next patrol, it would chances are something would happen during off crew, and I wasn't going to be able to make a full patrol or whatever. And he only lived a couple of years after that. But it was not an easy thing. Back about 10 years ago, the motto was "Take Back Vermont," which was to get it back from the liberals. Bernie Sanders is one of our senators, is a registered outright socialist, which means he's really a communist of some type. A lot of the politics are ruled a lot by this teachers union, which is very liberal, and we were trying to get some Republican and more conservative candidates elected, and the motto became "Take Back Vermont."
Sir, recommend coming right to 0.
I wondered, had he forgotten the incident that I so vividly remembered? I worked directly under his orders in the navigation department. Or was he just anticipating the question that took hours for me to ask?
The dogs came on board the ship.
Yep.
And the dog sniffed my locker, and you thought you had busted me.
You have the right to remain silent. Any statement you make may be used as evidence against you.
You said to me, "One of these days, Halbach, one of these days I'll get you."
Could be.
Sheely. I warmed up to him. I never would have imagined that. We probably needed men like Sheely during the Cold War. And I followed his orders. I couldn't wait to have a favorable political discussion with Jim Spires. I remembered him as being sharp and progressive, one of the smartest guys I knew. Besides his Navy job, he was the ship's newspaper editor and radio DJ. He even brought singer-songwriter Harry Chapin on board to sing in the mess decks when we were anchored in Spain. Being an artist, I was expecting to find that we had many things in common.
I would much rather communicate with somebody. I have no problem with people who disagree. My name is Rush Limbaugh. Thank you.
I got through all of Ayn Rand's books for the New Intellectual and Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead. I did a lot of reading during that period of time. That was my literary period, I guess.
I've always had a real job on the side, whether it's writing submarines or designing cameras for Kodak. I created the Kodak Gold program for the film. I also did all of the cameras that Kodak made for the Olympics. Everything that we did for Disney, I designed.
I asked Jim about what his thoughts were, 30 years later, about having fought the Cold War.
Of course, was the fire control technician for the torpedo. And I also stood sonar watches, and I really enjoyed that. You could hear the wonderful sounds of the ocean, the specific whistles or sounds that the whales made. And at one time, I thought I felt a slight move like this. I believe it was a whale that had come up and kind of nudged us. We could feel that movement. It was fascinating. We can enjoy this beauty because it's guarded by what our job was and what we did. And I think it kept the peace. It kept us able to enjoy the freedoms that we have now. And it was also a vehicle of beauty.
I'm a bit dismayed by the whole process. It seems that I was on board a different ship, and I'm going to have to take a different tack on this documentary. Or if I keep on running into these guys, it's going to be pretty clear that I'm the delusional one. I worked alongside Laney in the navigation department. I remember him knowing his job, but didn't remember any of his political views.
Current political situation, I can almost trace back to the end of World War II, when George Patton was not allowed to roll to Moscow. That would have put the end to the communist problem. We wouldn't have had a Cold War. I like a strong military because it keeps the peace. You want a strong police force to keep your town quiet. Bill Clinton scared the crap out of me. Al Gore could not have handled 9/11. George Bush is smarter than Al Gore, but Dan Quayle is smarter than both of them put together.
I'm just having a real hard time, being with these guys for, any length of time, because it's just kind of like a reminder of the past. Just these guys having an affinity for being underwater for 70 days, and I just couldn't wait to get the hell out of there after a week underwater. Plus, they're so radically different than my train of thought. It's just drudgery after all. It's just plain drudgery. It's like, God, I don't even want to turn the camera on. I don't even want to go and interview anymore. It's like, am I doing the right film? I'm dreading it. What I had forgotten was I was one of those men when I was 19. Being on my first voyage, I kissed nuclear-tipped torpedoes, navigated the ship's course, relished the feel of sea spray, and closed the hatch for a 3-month patrol. I felt the importance of the mission. Our first goal as submarine sailors was to qualify. Qualifications meant passing all of your exams and knowing the operations of the ship, forward to aft. If you didn't qualify, you were kicked off the sub and assigned to a surface ship. After you passed qualifications, you received your dolphins, which is like Air Force guys getting their wings.
I was amazed at how roomy and livable a Polaris submarine could be. We have foam rubber mattresses, pillows, and sheets just like home. We have enough film on board to have a different Hollywood feature for every night on the patrol. We have things like bingo once a week, weightlifting, Cokes anytime you feel like it. I tell you, life under the sea is okay. You've got to go after things by yourself on a submarine, digging out information on your own. They figure you for a man, and brother, you'd better measure up to it.
And then on Sundays, the crew's mess turned into a Christian chapel.
On the other side, the preservation of liberty must be prosecuted with a regard for truth and justice and a decent respect for the rights of the individual.
It's quite a life. You really are home.
One thing you should remember, you're doing a very important job for your country. The missiles on this ship represent more firepower than all of that used by all the armed forces in World War II.
We entered the void. 70 days underwater, on patrol, only receiving messages, not communicating with the outside world, because that would give away our position.
You're just on this long tube. You even kind of get used to, you're not sure if it's day or night.
You can't see out. There's no windows like everybody thinks you could see windows out of a submarine. There's no windows to look out. Once you were underneath the water, you were underneath the water.
I think once the reality hit that, hey, we're going to go out, we're going to submerge, and the world's not going to see us again for 10 weeks, for 70 days, there's sort of a finality to that there's not a whole lot to be excited about.
May I have your attention, please? This is the captain speaking. We have reached our patrol station. Now, you know the importance of our mission and you know the rules of the game. We don't communicate. We just listen and stay ready and stay quiet.
Generally, our tendency towards being on the ship was nobody wanted to be there. There were a few people that liked it, but I think they had more mental issues than anything else with the real world.
When you're underway for 2.5 months, you basically kind of put your emotions in a box and you just shut them away.
It just seemed like it took forever for the time to pass. And it just, as I recall, just the frustration and the boredom.
People would kind of become so depressed that they just wouldn't talk to anybody. You couldn't even get them to say anything. They were all worried that we were going to blow the world up for real.
You didn't sense that there was an end. It just seemed like it was going to go on and on and on.
Many of us felt a growing sense of impending doom and despair. Dark humor lifted the burden of our mission. We called ourselves the baby killers. You make 'em, we bake 'em, referred to Ruskies making their babies, and we baking them.
Aye.
But even cynicism didn't cut it. Monotonous days turned from weeks into months, with the boredom occasionally punctuated with the terror of either sinking or blowing up the world. I found myself sinking deeper and deeper into darkness. I finally found a way to deal with it. A piece of foil from the mess decks substituted for rolling a joint. It was important that it be disposable. I had to hide from the officers and a few narcs, but most of the crew either tolerated or participated. As a qualified submariner, I had learned the ventilation system. The best place to smoke was in the crew's head or near any exhaust fan. From there, the smoke was sucked into a charcoal filter room and eventually recycled through the rest of the ship.
Every now and then we could smell it. And that usually meant they were up there smoking it by an intake vent, sucking air out of that room, having to go all over the other ship, and we're all like, oh, somebody's getting high.
I don't remember anything about illegal use of drugs or anything on there. As far as I know, it really didn't happen. All of our guys were good guys. Obviously, they were dedicated to be there.
As I recall, we did not have a drug issue. I'm sure we must have had one or two.
What would you calculate percent of the crew?
Oh, I'd say a good 80, 85%, easily.
So do you know of any drug use on board the boat?
No, I did not.
The guys would sneak mainly hash, because it was what was available in Spain, and they would sneak that on board, and I know that it was used on board.
At one point, you could buy hash, a chunk about this big, probably about that thick, for about $7, and everybody cut them into chunks for the number of days we were going to be on patrol, and they would eat a chunk every time they were on watch.
It's just the way it was back then, you know, so you couldn't have thrown every person out of the Navy that smoked dope, or you wouldn't have had a Navy left.
Of all the places on board the sub that we smoked, do you remember?
You know, just the missile in Sherwood's Forest was the primary one.
This is Sherwood's Forest, a 3-floor compartment where all the missiles were stored. Lower level was mostly vacant of personnel, and it had a huge ventilation intake vent. After a few hits, I ditched the foil pipe, down the toilet, where it was blown out to sea. Being stoned allowed us to transcend our way of thinking, giving us the perspective to see how crazy it was for anyone to pull the trigger.
It's really something to see that missile shoot out of the water and blast off. They say it makes you mighty proud to be the man behind the missile. A real professional.
I did not feel like a proud professional. In fact, as the months passed, I sickened every time I thought about following an order that would bring about the end of the world. Many of us were still in our teens, fresh out of high school, and coming from stressful home environments. Who better to launch weapons of mass destruction? Our sub alone had enough ammo to blow up every major city in the world. The U.S. Navy had 41 such subs, each carrying 16 missiles. Each missile contained at least 10 warheads, and each warhead had the capacity to blow up a city like Dallas 3 times over. Add to that thousands of jet bombers and land-based missiles, with the Russians matching us up and down the board.
the system is structured is every ship would go on patrol with a given target package. And target package would be a term given to the assignments which would be given to your missiles. So you would have a given package that might say 3 would be fired over here and 2 would be fired over there. And then an hour and a half later, you'd fire 3 more here and 2 more there. Or you might have a package that say all 16 would go at once.
If we got a message that we had to launch them, we had to launch them. There was a reason, and that was it.
Both sides with their fingers on the trigger. And, you know, if we weren't there or if they weren't there, I'm sure one side would have pulled the trigger.
Well, it's really amazing because at that particular time of the Cold War, every little nation, plus the Soviets and plus NATO and everybody else, had submarines operating in the Mediterranean. On any given day, there was most likely 15 or 20 submarines someplace at sea operating.
Several times a week, the Pentagon sent us teletype messages by satellite, directing us into attack position. We dropped whatever we were doing and ran to our assigned place on the ship. Only then were we informed that it was a drill, except for this one time.
Man battle stations missile.
Okay, is this going to be a real one? Are we just going to go to battle stations and play? Or are we going to really go to battle stations? That was probably the tensest time because you never knew. Because you knew our job was out there to shoot the missiles.
We had to man battle stations. I remember looking over at Lieutenant Snyder. He gave me this look. He was, I don't want to say he was sweating, but he was really nervous. We had drills. We were always having drills. But that one, it kind of went, oh man, what are we going to do? Are we going to actually shoot here?
The minutes went by and there was no, the captain didn't come on and say, this is WSRT, this is a drill. There was no word. And I remember the talking just kind of went away and got very quiet. And people just kind of looked at each other thinking, what in the hell's going on here?
I was probably 22 or 23 years old. I'm in my flip-flops and I'm thinking to myself, we're going to war and I'm standing in my bath flippers and we're gonna blow the world up.
Shit, this is real. This is really gonna suck. Well, I wonder what life's gonna be like when we come out. Are we all gonna be zombies?
Sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, you know, if this was it, my family would already be crispy critters because we're a retaliatory force. And, you know, am I really prepared to be, you know, participate in the decimation of the world? And I never did answer the question. I did what most good soldiers and sailors do, and that is I just tucked it way in the back of my mind. You can't really thoroughly entertain the notion without being brought face to face with some real horror and maybe the inability to do the job. And I didn't want to be unable to do the job.
The guy that was on the reactor plant, I don't remember his name, but I remember watching him cry. Oh, the guy that was the electrician, that was Roger Macbeth, and he was just red in the face, and he was on the verge of tears coming out.
We pretty much had it planned that if it was an actual message, the key officers would be armed.
I was sitting at the fire control system by myself. So if somebody was to sneak up on us, I was supposed to shoot them down. That was my job. And Meredith came out the 45 on. I remember that, in case somebody didn't do what they were supposed to do, I guess. I thought, well, this is it.
Everybody was starting to get really nervous. I remember the executive officer actually had somebody show up in the engineering spaces with a Thompson machine gun because they were worried that this was real.
It was tense. I remember hearing heightened chatter from other crewmates over my headset, wondering if this is it, the real thing. It seemed like hours passed. Then the captain walked past me holstering a .45 caliber. That had never happened before.
Everybody was sitting there thinking, maybe this is not a drill, maybe this is the real thing.
Well, it usually only took about 20 minutes and then the drill was over, but for some reason this one drill went a little bit longer. It took about 6 hours, I think. It seemed like forever.
But you stayed ready, and yeah, we would have, if given the codes and sent to do it, we would have done it.
Basically what had happened was I guess the captain got drunk the night before and couldn't wake up. And so we were all sitting on watch waiting, and nobody knew that this was the problem with the captain, so we thought this was the real thing.
I romanticized my role in the drama. Imagine taking a bullet while sabotaging the launch. But I was 19, obsessed with sex and the pursuit of unrequited love, not ready to die. When we returned from patrol, Captain Meredith was relieved of his duties and replaced by Captain Gables. The more you drilled, the more you became desensitized. The action of blowing up the world became as routine as brushing your teeth. Although I had a top-secret clearance, I had no idea where any of those missiles were going. But Steve Van Horn did. He was the fire control technician who helped target the missiles. Were they always targeted towards Russia?
I can't really answer that kind of stuff.
So you still can't talk about that?
My understanding is that's not information that will ever be talked about.
But you knew how many warheads there were, or did you not know until it was time to launch?
Well, I don't think I can talk about that. You're not supposed to talk about system capability. You're just not.
I have a pretty good idea what system capability is. But just so I don't breach any secrets, this is what I got off the internet. The nose cone of the missile is where all the nuclear warheads, or packages, were housed. The delivery vehicle for the warheads is what the military called a bus. When the target is in sight, the warhead would get off the bus and deliver its package. Although I had a top-secret clearance, I had no idea where those missiles were going.
To this day, I can still repeat the launch sequence. Somebody asked me, I can go 1, 16, 3, 14, 5, 12, 7, 10, 9, 8, 11, 6, 13, 4, 15, 2. It's been 15 years since I had to do that. So it became a habit, and it's just like pulling the trigger. It would be a terrible thing to have done, but it had to be a habit.
There was also a rather crude joke that was, we had a couple of missiles on board that were loaded with candy. And that the first missiles going in would blow open, there'd be candy. So all the kids in Russia would go out and grab the candy. And then we would deliver the secondary warheads.
John Dadazio referred to our sub as the ultimate death machine. He was trained to be a nuclear reactor operator, highly technical, well-versed in all the operations of the sub. I tracked him down in El Paso, Texas.
We got hot dogs, brats, nachos, and cheese. Come on, get something to eat. Come on. We got hot dogs, chili cheese dogs, bratwurst.
When we started designing this, I said, no problem, piece of cake. I said, I lived on a submarine. I can pack as much stuff in this little room as possible. To start this up, we sold everything off in Michigan, came down here, thought everything was completely set up. And I told my wife, I said, you know what? I'm back on patrol. I said, we moved 7 times in 2 years. I said, I feel like I'm back in the military. For the first month while we were waiting for everything to get taken care of, it was a waiting game. And that's a lot of what I think stresses a person out and puts a lot of pressure on you, is waiting for something to happen, not knowing what's going to happen, just waiting for it. And that'll drive you crazy. I think actually I went from being a normal person to a crazy person. We were just down and under. You didn't know if you were going to live from one day to the next. You didn't know what was going in the outside of the world, because the outside of the world was the outside of the sub, and you were underwater. So it was like, how much can they mess with us? And like right now, I'm shaking on the inside just talking about this stuff. Can we go to another topic?
He gets so depressed that he says that he has no love for anything. He has no love in his heart for anything. And you get very depressed.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that gets him out of it until he just goes to bed and sleeps it off. Sometimes he sleeps for 6-8 hours in the afternoon, and then
Telling my secrets.
And then he'll get up and he'll stay up all night, and he's manic. And then I think it's because he was on the ship so long. I said I think that it's caused him to have episodes of sleepless nights.
It was a psychological waiting game is what it felt like. We're supposed to love one another, and basically our job was to kill everybody. It was scary.
Of all my shipmates, John was the only one able to put into words what I wanted to express. I related to his internal conflict, but unlike John, I'm able to sleep through most nights.
How could most of these guys have memories so different? Most of them didn't view the Cold War as immoral. It seemed like they would do it all over again if called upon. Then I got an email that gave me hope. Robert Rose, the atomic weapons officer, pondered why and what we were doing with the key to world's destruction. Finally, it was the email I was waiting for. I immediately got back to him, but got no response. I tried again, and again, nothing. Rose seemed to have disappeared, like he had gone off on patrol, into the void. His silence triggered all the demons in my head. I fell back into that all too familiar space, like when I was isolated on the sub. No one cares. Who cares about this anyway? Poor Mel. Mel, have a martini. You're safe in here. Nobody cares about this anymore. Let's light up a bowl and forget about all this now.
Did I really want to sit and talk? I said, well, if you're willing as a sailor to sit with the camera and talk, you've got to be one depressed son of a bitch right now. Because we did fall off the face of the earth. People didn't come back and say, don't you understand that what makes us so special is the fact that we're reliable? Just reliable, just basic common people doing reliable stuff. That was our submarine sailors. I had confidence as a missile officer, and I had the launcher key around my neck, but I had confidence that it would never be used wrong. My job as a weapons officer was to take care of the birds, spin them up, and make sure my data told the world that you assured mass mutual destruction. As brutal as that sounds, my data says, you use it, we will assure ourselves mutual destruction. It's not my job to think about that philosophy. We had in our wardroom, in the stateroom, there was a sign up there. It had the key, the launch key, and it said on top of it, it said, key to Moscow. And you learn them, we burn them, along the bottom. And it was that desensitization that you weren't paid to think about, because it would just make you crazy. Because every single one of us, as we sit here, love our children. And we hope that people on the other side did too.
Today, Rob coaches football and teaches social studies at a Miami high school.
And it's not the corner's responsibility, right?
Yeah.
Who's responsible for us?
He had his key, but he got...
Set the bar high enough, and they will perform. You gotta horse them up. You gotta coach them up. And it's no different to qualifications. I use it every single day. Our dropout rate is in the high 30s, the low 40s. And any kid that you can get a connection with that comes to school, they're in the middle of the summer, it's on their vacation, and we're standing here at 9 o'clock in the morning, and they've been here since 7:30. In the evening, we pick them up at 5:30. That teaches them a discipline they'll need to go out into the world. So it comes down to teachers and guidance and coaches to get them into college. And that is our primary function, is to get them into college. You've got to get the Dolphins on everybody. And if you take that philosophy that these kids need their Dolphins, it doesn't matter where they come from or what they do. Yeah, which is more the real case. But
Getting the Dolphins on everybody is what gets Rob out of bed every morning.
When I speak to the kids about deterrence, I can speak to them of what it was like to sit in the missile house Christmas Eve and spin missiles up in the ready position, not knowing whether or not it was a training exercise or not, but doing it because you were trained to do your job. And you knew if you were trained to do your job, you'd never have to pull that trigger. One of the things that is very different on a submarine when it comes to handling of nuclear weapons is you are in touch with your mortality. You have to drive the ship. You have to dive the ship. You have crew members around you. You have responsibilities for your people, and you're constantly reminded that if something goes wrong, you could die. We always took for granted that this number of dives would equal the number of surfaces, but you are on a very complex platform. We were just that good at it, and that's not bragging. It's just the statement was our crew was extremely sharp.
There were things aboard the ship that did work, things I'd chosen to forget about. Our lives were in each other's hands. We had to trust each other. I had repressed this over the years, choosing to remember only the insubordination, drugs, and cynicism. Rob reminded me that there was a lot more to the story.
I left everything I owned that was in the Navy in a box, and I quite literally walked off and left it in a closet, and somebody else has it now, I'm sure, or they threw it out. But when I moved, I left it and I walked away from it. And then you just kind of find out that you can't walk away from it. But that's what I did, because I said I need to get on with my life and I need to think differently. And I think that other people cling to it, and I don't think you can cling to it. I think you have to recognize it's part of it. You have to close the book on it. But it is something that the book never kind of closes because it's always there.
That chapter in my life awakened my mind to think differently. It shaped my beliefs, changing me from an angry young man into a stubborn, sometimes self-righteous pacifist. We all weave our past into a narrative to internally confirm and justify who we are. Recognizing who I was in the past seems so distant. Yet, I catch glimpses from that time that have shaped who I am. I wouldn't have arrived at who I am today without the experience of being a submarine sailor at the front lines during the Cold War. The shadow of mutually assured destruction sure can change a fella.
Leave a hole